Jonathan Taylor is good at football. It's the third edition of our 2023 Colts Roster Reviews. We're going position group by position group and analyzing their strengths and weaknesses from 2023 and thinking about what we need to know as we head into 2024. This week's video belongs to the running backs. Since the running backs is a relatively small position group, we're going to go through each player individually and then grade the unit as a whole for all the players that are on the active roster for the Colts right now. And we'll start, of course, with Jonathan Taylor. His statistics are slightly askew considering the fact that he didn't play for us until week 5 and he was also off the field for weeks 13 through 15. But that almost accentuates his performance when he was on the field, knowing just how much time he did miss. Taylor ended the year with 169 carries for 741 yards, 7 touchdowns, and an average of 4.4 yards per carry. Knowing that he only participated in 10 games this year, this is impressive. He would have been on track for well over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns, which would have been a top 2 rusher in the league if you're counting just yards. Needless to say, the 2020 second round pick has blossomed into arguably our best player on offense and certainly one of the most valuable Colts year in and year out. Thankfully, after his contract dispute was resolved earlier this season, he will remain signed on to this team until 2027. So we shouldn't have to worry about him walking out the door anytime soon. With Jonathan Taylor likely in the backfield for the next 3 seasons and him theoretically performing at a top 5 level on a consistent basis, the ground game for the Colts should find plenty of success. Zack Moss is next up, and he was essentially our RB1 for a spell this year in the absence of Jonathan Taylor, and I feel great about his contribution to this team. His 183 carries for 794 yards, 5 touchdowns, and an average of 4.3 yards per carry massively contributed to this offense in a very underappreciated manner. It was nice to have someone like Zack Moss, who does have a similar play style to Jonathan Taylor, to have someone like that powering the run game forward when Taylor wasn't on the field. Moss never fumbled, and he was able to gain significant chunks of yardage on a consistent basis. He was a reliable running back, a reliable RB2, and the running game was really effective when both of them were on the roster and on the field. Zack Moss really is a lot like Gardner Minshew, actually. If we lost Jonathan Taylor somehow, similarly to if we lost Anthony Richardson, Zack Moss would be a competent starter for this team for however much time he needed to fill in. Of course, the best case scenario is that that never happens and he can just be an excellent RB2 all year long. Either way, he's a great addition to this team and provides a lot of value to the Indianapolis Colts. However, Zack Moss is an unrestricted free agent this year in 2024 if we don't re-sign him, and that can become problematic very, very quickly. Obviously, I want to re-sign Moss, but I want to re-sign everybody, and that's just not how the NFL works. It's definitely feasible that we don't see him return to this team next year. I would like to think that he's a relatively inexpensive, high-value player, but we'll just have to see if the front office agrees with that take, especially considering who else we have in the backfield, who we might as well talk about right now. If we do lose Zack Moss to free agency, the question is who is filling in for him? Who is going to assume his role as the RB2, the reliable back that can rotate in on a consistent basis, with the expectation that maybe you're going to have to be the number 1 guy? We don't actually have a very confident answer to that question, as our number 3, Trey Sermon, is a restricted free agent this season, and our number 4 running back, Tyler Goodson, who we'll get to in a second, is an exclusive rights free agent in 2025. Sermon was taken in the 3rd round to the 2021 draft by San Francisco and was later, of course, shipped off to Indianapolis. He had a stint with the Eagles as well, but he accounted this season for 35 carries in 2023 for 160 yards and an average of 4.6 yards per carry. The yards per carry stat line is very consistent across the board for the Colts. The top 3 running backs are separated by 0.3 of a yard. Trey Sermon is a perfect example of just how deep the running back pool in the NFL is in 2024. Trey Sermon, a lot of Colts fans, I don't think even know that he's on the team. A lot of NFL fans don't even know who he is or remember who he is. And Trey Sermon is great. He absolutely is capable of being an RB2, maybe could be capable of being an RB1. He has the power to fight for highly contested yards. He has the speed to break away into open space, into the secondary. and he has the receiving abilities that really fit the Colts' offensive scheme. Sermon played in Philadelphia and came over with Shane Steichen, so he's really a perfect fit. I think he's probably one of the more underrated, underappreciated players on this Colts roster and in the league as a whole. I think a lot of people forget about him. If we were to lose Zack Moss, which of course I don't want to happen, I wouldn't panic though, because Trey Sermon, we know, is still on this team, should be on this team, although granted he is a restricted free agent this season. I guess I shouldn't just gloss over that fact. He is a restricted free agent this offseason. Being a restricted free agent means that he is still currently contracted to be an Indianapolis Colt, but other teams can pursue him and they would have to essentially buy him out if they would like to. So if we did lose Trey Sermon, we would have a cash compensation for that. But still, regardless, we can't lose both Zack Moss and Trey Sermon. We have to keep at least one this offseason. Now, will Trey Sermon be bought out by another team? I doubt it, but it's a scary idea, right? I think that he can provide a lot of value to a team, especially if they get him for a reasonable price. Regardless, we need one of Zack Moss or Trey Sermon to return in 2024. It would be great if we got them back. It would be great if we got everyone that's a free agent back and then we won the Super Bowl 10 years in a row and everyone was happy. It's not how it works, right? At the very least, my goal is to have one of Zack Moss or Trey Sermon returning, and it's probably going to be Trey Sermon since Zack Moss is an unrestricted free agent and way more highly coveted in the league because he is way more proven. We want one of them back, not just because of injury concern for Jonathan Taylor. Of course, that's its own situation, but also just having a clear rotation of running backs to keep everyone fresh so that in those big moments, like the Texans game, we can have who we want 100% fresh, healthy in the game in the moment that they need to shine in. Now, I just talked about Houston, which is a little bit unfortunate considering the fact that the next running back that we're going to talk about is our number 4 guy, Tyler Goodson. He gets a lot of hate because of what happens on that 4th down against the Texans in Week 18. Unfortunately, a lot of people know his name for the wrong reasons. I personally fundamentally don't like hating on players. I don't like it when other people hate on players or coaches or refs or anyone really. In the moment, of course, that dropped pass, which wasn't even totally his fault, feels like the end of the world. And sure, it was the end of our season. And obviously, I'm very devastated by that, just as you are. But now that we're a month and a half away from that moment, it was really just one play from Tyler Goodson that wasn't 100% his fault, and we should not define his entire worth as a football player on that one play. If that was a random play in the second quarter in week 3, people would have a different narrative about Tyler Goodson. We'll treat it as one play when we review his season, albeit knowing that that was his one moment to shine in a clutch moment, and it didn't turn out the way we wanted to. We had our number 2 quarterback and number 4 running back on the field, and we don't need to relive that moment. Goodson finished 2023 with 13 carries for 87 yards, which is actually 6.7 yards per carry. Of course, that stat is slightly askew when you account for the fact that Goodson had far fewer touches than Sermon, Moss, and Taylor did. But nonetheless, Goodson contributed when he needed to in a positive way, for the most part. Now, Goodson had 6 catches on the year for 34 yards for an average of 5.7 yards per reception. Tyler Goodson was fine, right? He didn't have every opportunity to prove himself on the field, to prove his worth last season, which is logical considering the strength of the other 3 running backs on this team. Goodson is a free agent next offseason, so we'll just have to see how that goes. We'll have him for this year, presumably. Nonetheless, Tyler Goodson was fine. He has potential despite that one incomplete pass on 4th down against the Texans. I know I keep mentioning it. I'll stop, I promise. He adds depth to this running back room and contributes positively to this team when he needs to, for the most part. Briefly, I'll mention Evan Hull before we get out of here. He's also on the roster, albeit not the most impactful member of this team, but he's here. Evan Hull is a strong number 5, and we know how much running back depth means in the NFL and really just football as a whole as the season progresses. I like Evan Hull. I'm glad he's here. I'm glad he adds depth to this room. I think he has a lot of potential. He could be a powerful young running back with, as I said, a lot of potential for the future. And I look forward to seeing him remain on this team for years to come. Before we recap and grade the entire unit as a whole, I want to highlight the receiving aspect of the running back room because Shane Steichen's offense really highlights that aspect of the running back play. Running backs as a whole combined for 61 receptions for 412 yards and 3 touchdowns. All of that combined is an average of over 5.5 yards per catch. For a group of running backs, that isn't bad, right? Moss and Taylor average closer to 8 yards per reception, and they're the ones on the field the majority of the time. Steichen's offense relies quite heavily on production from running backs through the air, and for the most part, they've delivered. It's really nice for a young quarterback like Anthony Richardson for him to know that on the field at a given time, he could reliably throw to 3 receivers, a tight end, or a running back, or potentially have all 5 options. All right, now that that's out of the way, we can give the Colts running backs their final season grade. And actually, this is our last position group of the offense, so we'll give the entire offense their average grade as well. I would give the 2023 Indianapolis Colts an 8.5 out of 10, the same grade we gave the receivers. It's a solid group, right? Jonathan Taylor is one of the best in the league, and we couldn't ask for very much more. Zack Moss is a reliable, strong RB2 with a similar playstyle to Jonathan Taylor. Trey Sermon is the same at RB3, and then you have Tyler Goodson and Evan Hull adding some depth that, for the most part, has really positively contributed to this team. It really is a great group, and I don't feel pressure to make any changes to it moving forward. We may have to fight to keep Zack Moss and or Trey Sermon on this team as soon as this offseason, right? As soon as today, really. But if this group remains intact over the offseason, I will have no complaints, and an 8.5 out of 10 is its final grade. So to recap, the O-line received a 7.75 out of 10, the quarterbacks got a 9.25 out of 10, and the receivers and the running backs each received an 8.5 out of 10. And so that means that our overall average for the entire offense as a whole is an 8.5 out of 10. I didn't plan that, I promise. I actually laughed the first time I saw it. I do think it's a fair grade, though, overall. On average, the offense, an 8.5 out of 10 for the Indianapolis Colts. It's a bit of a boring grade, but it's all right. We'll see if the defense can beat that, and we'll start with that next week. The running backs got an 8.5 and brought the overall offense score to an 8.5, and that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Feel free to like and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Next week, we're going to be talking about the D-line and the linebackers. The Super Bowl is tomorrow when this video comes out. We'll see if the Lombardi Trophy returns to Kansas City and returns to the AFC, or if the NFC and the 49ers are going to steal it back and maybe give the Colts an opportunity to then bring it back to the AFC. We'll see, but no matter what happens, no matter who wins, enjoy the last NFL game of the season as much as you can from the Colts' perspective.